This is a demonstration of query by annotation, a graphical interface for querying a database of trees. I'm going to select Oracle. It's a server running at the University of Melbourne. Now we can see the first tree. It consists of non-terminals and a string of terminals at the bottom. This is from the Penn Tree Bank, a database of approximately 50,000 trees. We can see that we're displaying the first tree, tree number 1. If I click on next tree, I'll see tree number 2, and so on. We can query the tree bank by annotating a tree. For example, to find any cases of a verb phrase dominating a verb phrase, I click on one and then the other, and then click Submit Query. Here's the first result. In addition to showing the result tree, we see the original query annotated on the tree. This shows us why the query matched this particular tree. In fact, it matched in more than one location. I can click for Next Match to see the other match in the same tree. Or I can look at the next tree in which there is a match, and so on. That query was for a dominance relation. Let's try a query for a precedence relation between two siblings. For instance, between the past tense of a verb and the following noun phrase. Let's look at some other relationships between nodes. If we click on a node and a descendant, we'll see a dotted line, which means the descendant relationship. We can submit that and we'll find cases of a noun phrase beneath another noun phrase, so any kind of compound structure. It could be a child, like we see here, or here, or here, in many cases. Occasionally, there will be some intervening structure, for example there. In fact, here we see many possible configurations. Notice that we can toggle the different relationships between nodes. Let's return to our first query. If I click on this, I can convert the parent relation to an arbitrary descendant relation. If I click on it again, it converts back. Similarly, between siblings, I can select immediate following sibling. If I click on it, it switches to following sibling. This relation represents immediate following, regardless of whether it's a sibling. This one represents following, again regardless of whether it's a sibling. For example, these two constituents are in the immediate following relation. And that's the interpretation of the edge we get by default. We can click on it though to get the non-immediate following relation. If we submit this, we'll find cases of these two verbs, the present participle and the gerund, that may not be consecutive, such as there. We can simply build up a complex query by clicking on a sequence of nodes as follows. That query matched the original tree upon which it was annotated, but if we request other examples, we'll see many. We can edit the result of a query because it has the form of a query, so instead of clearing this, I can simply refine it further. For example, I could add an additional constraint. Now I could also negate that constraint. This is done with a right click. That's converted it to negation. So now anything that matches this query will not have a VP underneath it. Queries can be quite discontiguous within the tree. For example, here I look for a sequence of different kinds of verb. There is no requirement that they end up being contiguous in the result. They'll be quite spread out. When we talk about the relationship between an ancestor and a descendant, normally we have no constraint on the horizontal alignment of that descendant. However, we could specify, for example, that this noun phrase appears leftmost within the sentence. Notice how there is a bunch of attributes that appear here. We can actually control these by the node attribute dialog. And now let's remove the label on this S and replace it with a wildcard. The underscore character. Now we'll find cases where VP is separated from an S by 2 steps, an S grandparent, but different nodes may intervene. In this case, it's another VP. In this case, it's an S. Well, that concludes this brief summary of query by annotation. The tool is being made available under the GNU Public License as part of the Natural Language Toolkit.